Hello and welcome. It's nice to have you all joining us. I know we'll have other people pop on at some point soon. So nice to virtually see you all. One of the things I dislike about Teams is we can't really see each other, or I can't see y'all, but it is such a pleasure to bring one of our incredibly qualified faculty members who actually happens to be a past Faculty Excellence Award winner, Dr. Kathy Black, to present today. Kathy is a professor of aging studies at USF Sarasota Manatee. She has a PhD from the State University of New York, Albany, and master's degrees in both social work and gerontology from University of Southern California, and also a master's degree in public health from the University of California, Los Angeles, or UCLA. She has a list of accolades 2 arms long, so I'm not going to read them all, but she is a trusted and in-demand consultant for various national and state departments of elder affairs and millions of other things, and for AARP. And she recently, she was invited by the World Health Organization to launch the Decade of Healthy Aging Leaders program. So aren't we so fortunate to have one of our own as such an eminent, internationally recognized scholar. And we're equally blessed to have her with us tonight to present on her impactful and important work. All that being said, thanks for joining us again. I'm going to pitch it to Jessica, who's driving the bus after this, and I'm going to say one last thank you to Dr. Kathy Black. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 6th installment of the Virtual Leadership Series that we are so happy to bring to you. Before we get started, and I want to say thank you to India for that incredible introduction of Kathy. It's been awesome to just chat with her briefly and to get to know her a little bit more. But as far as we are concerned, logistically, because we cannot see you and because we can't hear you if you do have a question, there should be a button that has, it looks like 2 speech bubbles. One has a question mark in it. That is the Q&A box. So any questions that you have throughout the evening, please ask them. We have decided to, if a question pops up, then Kathy is happy to answer it. So you don't have to wait to have your questions answered until the very end. And I'll type in there right now, that way you'll get a notification and you'll know where it is. But without further ado, I'm very pleased to present Kathy Black.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you, India. I am really honored to have been a WLP recipient and really honored to be with you tonight. Thank you all for being here. And yes, I'm here to talk about enhancing healthy aging in your, I think that's a little clever way to put it, because it's your community, but it's also our community, and that's part of the change in community features that make life better for all of us. So the objectives briefly are to recognize why healthy longevity is a demographic imperative for all of us, and to recognize the role of the environment, our community, in helping us live healthy and good well-being, and to also introduce you to the concept of age-friendly communities, and also to inspire you. And so let's move ahead into some of the visuals I have for you tonight. So the United States is aging, the world is aging, we're all aging, and I think this is a very powerful image for you. Just in the next decade, as you can see, there are 6 states that will be more than 1 out of 4 will be 65 or older. And in case you didn't hear the news already, Maine has already surpassed Florida as the state with the highest proportion of older adults. That happened sometime within the past year. It's just a half a percentage point. And they only have about 240,000 65 plus, but and we have 4 million, but it is proportionately. And Maine also is the state with the oldest median age. New Hampshire and Vermont are close behind. And, you know, people like to think that, well, America's aging, but, you know, as I said, the world is aging. There's almost 20 nations with a higher proportion of older adults than we have, including Japan and much of Europe. And there's almost 50 nations with a higher life expectancy. I also like this slide because it shows you among the 3,000 or plus counties across the nation, aging is variable and it's very local. As you can see, some of those counties are getting older before others. 2/3 of the counties saw an increase in their age over the last year. And in Florida, actually the oldest county in the nation is Sumter County in Florida. Over 50% is 65 and older. And just an interesting FYI, in addition to the 65 age group being the oldest, the fastest growing demographic, within that, the census says, first they said the 85, now they say the 90 plus is the fastest growing sub-demographic. But in Florida, the fastest growing sub-demographic is 100 plus. So we are getting older. And how do we optimize the social, civic, and intellectual capital that comes with this increased longevity? This is really something to celebrate. And as you all know, there's a prevailing sense of doom and gloom, decline. However, we are in the midst of a massive transition, and we all know that people, as we age, we have growth opportunities and contributions and very satisfying lives that are available to us. And I say that because there is great diversity in the aging experience. And, you know, you've met one older person, you've met one older person. We are a combination of obviously socio-demographic variables that are all associated with different life expectancies and different life experiences. And of course, a variety of social experiences can affect us as we age as well, including many things that just seem to happen to us, no fault of our own. You know, whether we work, whether we leave the workforce voluntarily or not, widowhood, the average female spends 17 years in widowhood. So there's a variety of things that can happen, and we refer to these as cumulative life experiences, and they can be advantages and disadvantages, and they all add up, and they all create a very unique you as we age. Oops. So again, how do we spend those 30 extra years? We've gained over 30 years in life expectancy over the last 100 years or so. And if you are lucky enough to reach age 65, you have on average about 8,000 more days left. And that's roughly about the same time you have in middle years, in your middle age years. So that's an awful lot of time just to sort of hang up and do nothing. And I'm not saying that retirement is sort of hanging back and doing nothing. Many people want to work, continue to work or learn or travel or any other pursuits that they were thinking about and dreaming about all those years. But it turns out that your ability to do all those things are dependent on your health. You know, that old adage, if you don't have your health, you really don't have it. All the money in the world can't make up for that. So it turns out that our health is not just random as we age. And, you know, we used to say that the greatest predictor of your longevity was your parents' longevity. And certainly genetics are still important. But of course, as we all know, lifestyle factors such as our diet and exercise are factors. But it turns out increasingly where we live and the environments in which we get older also play a role in shaping our life and health as we age. And I just want to bring your attention to the Robert Wood Johnson link, and I'm sure Jessica will make this PowerPoint available to all of you afterwards. But you can see the very different life expectancies just based on a zip code. And that really dovetails into some of the issues we're facing today with the differences in underlying health conditions, because they don't just happen and appear at age 65. They are, developmental, they're chronological, they happen over years and through a variety of factors. I just want to bring us back to, I don't know why more people don't talk about this definition of health. It was developed by the World Health Organization in 1948. Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And I think we all intuitively know that, but yet somehow our health has been hijacked in this country and many Western countries associated with disease. Your health is, well, I've got diabetes or I've got arthritis. And really your health is a multidimensional construct, and it's so much more than a physical condition you may have. And all of these are important. As you all know, our cognitive health, our emotional health really matters. Many people don't even appreciate the value of our social health, but we are social beings. We need each other. And in case some of you have not heard, social isolation is a huge killer today. And it's equivalent. It's a risk factor for mortality equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And by the way, it afflicts people of all ages. As a matter of fact, the United Kingdom recently put in a minister of loneliness because many people were socially isolated, and our social health matters. So the World Health Organization has also defined healthy aging, and recognizing our intrinsic changes with age, those physical changes, those normative changes that do affect all of our body systems. And then, of course, those cumulative social experiences that also shape us. But it turns out that our environment will be a big predictor in whether it can help us still live well despite all of these things that we experience with age. And I just want to point out here, some of you are familiar with the blue zones. These are 7 regions around the world where people live extraordinarily long lives, very, very healthy, right into the very end of their lives. And they've looked at those, and they came up with this concept called life radiance. We spend 90% of our lives in a 5-mile radius around where we live. So again, the importance of local, the importance of community. And I also came across this 20-minute neighborhood, which is a construct that they, in a practice model that they use in urban planning, in innovative and progressive urban planning, I might add. And but as you can see on there, a neighborhood is filled with all sorts of things: safe walkability, housing diversity, transportation, lifelong learning. All these sorts of things we expect to see, in which we all thrive in a community. And I do want to also underscore here that this is for all people, all ages. And aging itself is a verb. We are growing up and growing older in these environments. For some reason, I'm having trouble clicking my. I'm sorry, I have to get my IT help to help me move my. Trying to advance that slide, and it's not letting me. So I'm going to go ahead and move on until I can get my slide advanced here. This is not. Oh, it's not advancing my slide for some reason. There's Jessica. She's coming in to help, but. What did you do? Button. Yeah, I did. Sorry. That's my IT help, everybody.
Or you can use those buttons over there. You can use those arrows to go back.
Oh, okay. Let me do that. Okay. I apologize. Okay, here I am. Sorry, everybody. So we talked a moment ago about the 20-minute neighborhood, and you may recognize many of those features because those are the social determinants of health that the Centers for Disease Control have identified a while ago. And basically, these lifestyle factors, these are the places where we born, we grow, we live, we play, we work, and we age. And these are happening throughout the life course. And again, ultimately, we eventually age. But again, the tie-in for livability and health for you here. Looking at the level of people themselves, what do they want? Well, People tell us over and over, study after study, they want to age in the communities in which they reside. Honestly, it's 80, 90% in study after study. So we want to create those opportunities for people. And however, whoops, sorry, now I'm going too fast on my slides, apologize. But are our communities ready for us as we age? Our homes have largely been built for healthy middle-aged adults, and our transportation has largely been designed 50 years ago for very suburban living, and it's very auto-dependent. So obviously, there is much we can do in the community. Now, the World Health Organization recognized that environments do play a role in our healthy aging, and so they started the Age-Friendly Community movement about 2006. It kind of launched, and there's over 1,000 communities to date, 40 countries, 240 million people. In 2012, ARP became a national affiliate. And as you can see, there's now close to 500 in the United States, including 6 states. And I'm really proud to point out that there's 36 in Florida, and that I was instrumental in leading Florida's first age-friendly community. And that's pretty much what I've been doing for the past 5 years. Now I've been helping with all the statewide communities, working very closely with all of them with ARP Florida. And so what is an age-friendly community? Well, the World Health Organization defines it as encouraging active aging by optimizing opportunities for health and participation to enhance quality of life. ARP talks about supportive social and physical environments that enable us to live meaningful and safe lives and contribute fully in community life. And in Sarasota, we defined it as promoting active, healthy, engaged living for people at all life stages and abilities throughout the life course. And as you can see, that definition is inclusive of everybody. And frankly, by doing that, it's inclusive of people at any stage of life with disabilities. And at any given time, 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4 of us has a temporary disability. And certainly disabled people certainly appreciate this. They've been fighting for this for years. So the age-friendly community model also, again, is very local. It's about communities building on what assets already exist and how to really push things to continue to make life better for people for that 100-year life, so that we can live fully until the day we die. And again, each community will have a different range of assets. The members will have different aspirations for how they want to live their lives. And it does address 8 domains of, we call them domains of livability. Basically, community features pertaining to the built environment, the social environment, and the service environment. And adapting those can actually make our lives better. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But I also want to share the this model that I developed. This is really multi-sector. Aging is a unifying construct and touches all of us, each one of us, in every sector and every industry as well. So that there's, it takes a village, all hands on deck, and people play a role, government plays a role, business plays a role, nonprofits, and communicating about how to make life better all play a role. And so moving into the built environment, our housing, housing becomes even more important as we age. We spend more time at home, and some of us may struggle to manage at home. And many of the homes that we live in were built, again, for people in middle ages and not to the wide diversity of health that may be expressed as we age. And it turns out that less than 5% of the nation's housing stock is universally designed. And I'm talking about, a doorway that's 36 inches wide to accommodate a wheelchair versus the standard 30-inch doorway. A door lever that can be used versus a doorknob, which is not good for an arthritic wrist with age. So there's a lot of things that we can do that are more expensive retrofitting, but can be built at no cost at the time of design to make that a lifelong home for people. And so accessibility is one, and options are another. Only 20% of today's families, today's housing accommodates the traditional mom, dad family with children. And yet most of the houses continue to be designed for that demographic, and that's very old school. So we need options. People, again, needing assistive help in managing the home. And so these are things that we need to think about as we age. And again, there's a room for everybody here. I created this particular sets of slides because everywhere I went and talked about this, everybody fully agreed, they understood, they get it. But what can they do about it? And there are roles for everybody. And so since I'm talking to general people today, I would say to you, think about it. How are you going to manage in your home? How is that going to work for you? The other thing is, can you share a room with peers or others? And I have to tell you that shared housing is really coming on strong. Just in Sarasota County, we have over 40,000 people 60 and over living alone. In some cases in 3,000 square foot homes that they don't need all that space and frankly could use some help in managing. Or we actually know that when people do share housing, not just economics benefits, but also social benefits as well. And so again, it's not for everybody, but it can be done quite successfully. And many of us remember times where we did have people living at home. So again, advocating for those different living options. Transportation is another built environment issue, and we outlive our safe driving abilities by 7 to 10 years. And so many people are asking themselves, what's going to happen? Not if, but when I can no longer drive. We largely live in auto-dependent settings. Much of Florida is certainly built that way. Much of the United States is built that way. And so what will happen to you when you're no longer able to get around? We think about public transportation, and people will tell you they cannot walk to the bus stop or wait in that hot, unsheltered setting with that beating sun. Some people need door-to-door service. Some people told us that they just don't feel safe. They're afraid of getting knocked down. Falls are a very serious issue with age. So there's some people just simply aren't accustomed to public transportation. So again, it's not going to work for everybody. And the coverage is also limited. And by the way, transportation, which is really access to the things that we need to do it and live fully, is also multimodal. When we think about our walkability, sidewalks in Florida just sort of seem to end. We don't have complete streets, even though we do have a complete streets policy. In fact, that policy was put into place across the state after a Dangerous by Design report came out. And it's done every year, and the year after year, Florida fares very, very poorly as most of the unsafe places for pedestrians in the nation as far as injury and fatality. And I mean, I'll tell you how bad it is. In 2016, Sarasota was rated 10th worst in the nation for pedestrian safety, and then it got even worse to number 4. So Florida rates very poorly in that every year. So this is really something across the state that could be improved. How can we make a difference? Take somebody out for a ride. People don't just want to go out and get their medicines or go to the doctor. People just want to get out, and people want to drive at night and maybe their vision is impacted and they don't feel safe. Just look at the sidewalks around 10 minutes around where you live. We have a tool, a walkability audit, that can help you improve that walkability, and particularly now in the time of COVID when we really need to all get out. And also helping people adapt to transitioning from driving. As you know, driving is a symbol of independence, very important for many people, and giving up the car keys doesn't mean giving up your life or being stuck at home, because we know a whole range of negative things happen when people are stuck at home. Our outdoor spaces really matter. It matters more to us with age because we have more time to spend. There's a concept called drift where, we're not going to a park in older ages to see a grandchild play ball, but because we have time just to kill. And we, however, many of our parks don't work for us because the accessibility issues, people who are using assistive devices will tell us that they can't access. There's not paved roadways or paths for them, and there's a lot of simple things that we can do in all of this. Creating benches for comfort, restrooms. People tell us, the whole slate of recent studies were done on older adults using parks, and it turns out that older adults want walking trails and pedometer mile markers, and yet our parks are still built for for soccer and other things. So let's make our parks for everybody, including the demographic that resides in the community. And I didn't mention the built environment also includes buildings. But just think about it. How many times have you encountered a building that the doors were awfully difficult to open, or it was difficult to hear? And so some of the things that we can do is really provide feedback to businesses about how to better adapt their setting so that older adults can frequent. I was recently, before COVID hit, at one of actually it was Whole Foods, and they got these high top chairs with no backs on them, no seat rails, and it was not a great use of investment, because who are their customers? People who are not going to feel safe sitting in those seats that aren't going to be helpful. In social participation, again, we're now into some of the social features. What are the activities that are available in your community? Again, Florida tends to do very well. I'm talking about a range of cognitive, social, recreational, all sorts of activities. But again, are those activities available, affordable to everybody? And are they adaptable? We've got a lot of people, for example, in stages of cognitive impairment or mobility limitations or eyesight or hearing, and can those activities really work for all of us? And those are the sorts of things that age-friendly communities also are focused on. What can you do? Well, you can invite people to get involved in activities. And we also know in Florida, 2 out of 3 people have moved here from somewhere else. And we know that when people's status changes, their life changes. Their life can get really small. And so we can outreach to people, particularly single, newly widowed people, and bring them along to engage in activities. And pretty soon they're inviting other people. Respect and inclusion is really more of a construct that really crosses over all of community life. And I'll just tell you here, we don't have time to get into it, but ageism is alive and well. I mean, people are being judged on the basis of what they look like. Even if you're 40, if you look old, you're going to be treated old. And we need to change that. Everybody needs to be treated with respect, whether you have gray hair, wrinkles, and you move slower, or glasses or hearing aids. And so we all can play a part on that. And also, intergenerational relations really go far to helping foster good relations. And I'm talking about intentional, reciprocal relations between the generations, not just 2 generations passing each other. By the way, we have 6 generations alive today, and most of us are working and living in multi-generational worlds. And so how do we come together and for our common interests? There's a lot of opportunity there. And again, doing all that you can do there can also make a difference. The area of civic participation and employment, again, the new word for retirement is work. The days of 20, 30 and plus years in retirement, in some cases more than your working life, are, they're really luxury for some people. Many of us will have to work to finance our longevity, but more importantly, many of us want to remain in the workforce. It's good for us cognitively, obviously, socially, fiscally. There are a lot of benefits. And for those of us who aren't working, volunteering really can make a difference. Age-friendly Tel Aviv actually has the doctors give out a prescription, and in addition to writing the medication, they write volunteer, and then they give a list of the health benefits, because we get much from giving, and all of those causes benefit. It's just one of those win-wins in life. And again, how are these volunteer experiences, as well as the work for those of us who are remaining in the workforce, how can those environments be adapted so that people of every ability can contribute? I had one woman in her 60s who volunteers at a domestic violence shelter, and she brings along her 90-year-old mother who helps sort the clothes. So everybody can play a part and make a difference. And by the way, it's not just the old school on volunteering almost as a unpaid help, but people want unique volunteering opportunities. They want micro volunteering opportunities. They've got an hour now. What can they do? They want to do what they want to do. They don't want to commit to 20 hours of, copying things, or, maybe they want to do something new at this point in their life. So we need to be adaptive to what people want to give. That is one huge untapped asset that's sort of sitting out there in plain sight. The average retiree spending 7 hours a day watching television. How else? What if just a little bit of that time was spent volunteering? Community supports and health services. Many of the things we experience with age really have nothing to do with Medicare coverage, caregiving and widowhood, and dealing with, a downward trajectory of health. And yet it's our neighbors that really matter. And who is there to help us if we fall in the house, or if we have help at home? How can we help each other? And increasingly there are neighborhood groups. Some of you may have heard of the village concept. It is certainly, there are many models out there to help community neighborhoods join together and help each other. One of the problems in Florida is we don't know our neighbors. Florida rates almost dead last in every measure of civic health. And again, knowing who's bedbound, who's caregiving, who's on oxygen equipment, who's limited, who's alone, these are things that will help us. Of course, it's all now a challenge in social distancing, but we can still reach out to our neighbors and do more. And lastly, in the service environment is communication and information. This is how we learn about our worlds. And, here I'm talking about both format and content. We need information to help us navigate all of the experiences that are going to happen with age. It almost takes a PhD to figure out what your long-term care options are. And by the way, majority of us do live at home. Over 95% of us live in the community, but many of us may ultimately, if we live in the later years, may require a long-term care. How do you access those options? We need information on what we need information about in a way that's readable and accessible to us. And as far as the format, there are a lot of things that we can do. Not everybody is digital. Today, there will be a day that we all are, but there's a digital divide. And how do we help people learn? How do we create access for people? And also little things like just increasing the font size. Again, those no cost, low cost ideas that will make a difference and benefit people of all ages. So I know I went through that quickly. But that's because I wanted to I wanted some dialogue and hearing from people about what struck you and what you'd like to see happen, or how you might play a role in making your community more age friendly. Jessica?
Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions yet, but I thought of a couple things as you're going through. Is there any database or list somewhere of nonprofits and companies that really push for this change on a more, political level of trying to change policy to get more park benches put in, or to create safer sidewalks and that sort of thing?
Well, there is an age-friendly business designation that was developed by AgeFriendly New York City, and I think perfected by AgeFriendly DC. It has yet to be adopted throughout Florida, but it's essentially, and I'll be glad to share this with anybody, it's essentially a one-page, two-sided document that really asks businesses to look at what you've got and really to declare yourself age-friendly if you're committed to some of these, things like there's a ramp to get in, or there's no steps, that there's adequate lighting, that there's a restroom that's accessible. And it also includes a customer service angle so that people treat the older customers better. This is outwardly facing. There's also increasing in focus inwardly facing on the aging workforce, because just about every industry is facing older workers. What we do see is more of a hodgepodge of, one hospital redesigning the work so that the nurses who are increasingly in their 40s can still do that 12-hour shift standing, or maybe alter that shift. So unfortunately, we don't see a lot of great leadership, but as people learn what they don't know, they are eager to adapt. And it is very important that we demonstrate and show people some of the things that they're already doing well and why it's good and how it can be better. On the work issue, I spoke to the Career Suncoast, to a group of workers 50 plus who are out of work. And by the way, we're expecting with COVID even greater impact to the boomers and beyond. Already from the 2008 recession, older adults were far less likely to return to the workforce and stay out longer and never really recoup the income that they had, and really hit their savings. This is going to continue now. And so how do we help employers recognize the value of that older employee and adapt that work environment so that the issue is not the older employee, but how do we, how can we still create those options? And again, when I spoke to the Career Suncoast group, it was really a difficult conversation. I remember one woman saying to me, I've got to start dialysis next week, but I need to work. And so how do we be flexible in the hours and, pairing up the younger workers with the older workers on technology training so that the older workers feel proficient and confident? We've got Gen Z and millennials who grew up with technology and feel more proficient, and certainly are more proficient. And yet people are capable of learning. And that's, we're talking about, work that's increasingly technical today.
Mm-hmm. We have a few more questions. This question, similar to the one I asked, but what sources are available to learn about volunteer opportunities, and more specifically, those micro-volunteer opportunities that you spoke about?
Well, those are the things that we really need, all of us, to be the leaders to create those. There are volunteer hubs everywhere. I mean, Volunteer Florida, I mean, it's huge. And if you contact me, I will direct you to many volunteer opportunities. And, it turns out that there's a lot of people who are volunteering. And, we spoke with Habitat for Humanity, and, they didn't realize, but they did adopt, a few practices to help people remain volunteering. For example, when you're over 80, no longer able to, they no longer want you climbing the ladder, which is a good thing, or on the roof. Mm-hmm. And so there's a whole bunch of ways that but you can still do other things. And so how do we adapt all of those volunteer opportunities so that people remain active and engaged? And on the micro volunteering, I'll just tell you something that I do every day, or every time that I go to Publix. I am on the lookout for anybody and everybody around me who I see spending the time looking that they're reaching, or that I see that they're struggling to get something. And I go in there with the time and spend the time, glad to spend the time on grabbing something off the shelf and letting them look at it, see if that's what they want. And it's what, could you imagine if we all did that? It's a lot of this is just about being nicer, isn't it? Being more thoughtful. But I would love to see an organization like Publix take that on and But the opportunities are everywhere. And, you know, even with your local neighborhood associations, just anywhere, there really is no excuse to not be volunteering today.
Excellent. We have another question. Could Public Housing Authority do something as simple as make low-income housing for elders more accessible? Even your example of changing outdoor knobs to levers.
Yes, and you know, the problem with you know, Section 8 or Section 202 is, you know, just you've got waiting lists of years, you know, hundreds or if not thousands of people on these lists waiting for, you know, affordable housing. So government solutions to housing will not be the only option. But yes, of course, they can be more accessible as well, but we need more options. You know, it used to be that people lived at home or they went to a nursing home. And in the 70s, assisted living came into play. Well, you know, Florida is underbedded in affordable assisted living. And by the way, some people don't want to go anyway. So what are those other opportunities? We want to live in our communities. We're seeing innovations in, you know, some affinity groups joining and creating congregate housing around, you know, rock and rollers. And Jimmy Buffett has a few housing sites now. Arts communities, LGBT. One of the innovative things that I've been seeing, and we're doing this all now in Florida, but there's a model called Bridge Meadows in San Diego and in Seattle, excuse me, Portland. And it's a foster care living for foster families and their children. And guess what? They have housing on site for older volunteers to live there in exchange for 10 or 20 hours a week. And in many cases, people can afford to live elsewhere, but they're choosing to live there because they want to give to those children. And talk about win-win-win, affordable housing, giving to families in need, giving to, I mean, there's so many opportunities to make a difference and for all people and all causes. And that's the sort of thing that I'd love to see unleashed ahead.
Great. And then Jennifer asks, thank you for this amazing presentation. I noticed that you were part of a theater program in your area. How was that received? Can you tell us more about your work in the arts? And does AARP support these types of programs in the community?
Yeah, I started AgeFriendly Sarasota, and for 4 years of the 5-year cycle, I was neck deep. This, as you can imagine, is a mile wide and a mile deep. It covers just about everything you can imagine. And so, yes, we were leaders across the state, across the nation, but every community, honestly, just blows me away with just amazing things that they're doing, and all unique to the community. And you know, I just love everything. I mean, you know, I'm working closely with a colleague. I just got off a 2-hour call with her. We meet every week because we're evaluating some of the nation's plans right now. And, you know, in Maine, they have over 100 age-friendly communities. And, you know, most of their efforts are volunteer led, and, it's, you know, it's very rural, frontier land in a lot of Maine. And they just do such cool things. Everything I learn is so cool. One of the things they have is at the local library, people are dropping off appliances that need fixing, and older adults who like to tinker and fix things are fixing them and bringing them back fixed, and just simple things like that. I mean, there's just so many simple, great ideas out there. And then there's so many packaged things to help you. You know, to make sure your home works for you, to make sure your neighborhood works for you, the walkability audit. There are just so many packaged things. Is your park, you know, work for everybody? We have tools that we can give out on all of these things, so you can evaluate them yourself and, you know, create some buzz on how you might do that. On the issue of the arts, that is so important. And we did in Florida, the Florida Studio Theater, we did a play on aging. And I have to tell you, the people that came to that play were not the same people that go to the senior center. So we reached a whole new audience. And people, it was so powerful to see people talk about monologues and dialogues about aging that reached them and touched them in ways that made them realize they're not alone, that we're all in this together, and this is really an opportunity to be there for each other. We are interdependent throughout the life course. And the arts also, there is age-friendly art standards. Yes, of course. And some of the things that we can do is make the arts experience more, compliant for people with who are, handicapped or a disability, even cognitive impairments. Some of the arts venues are now holding special hours for caregivers and people with ranges of cognitive impairment so that they can visit at times where they're not overwhelmed. There's just so many cool things going on. I just got done teaching a class on aging in France. I do that every year. No, I didn't get to go this year. So this year it had to be online. But it's to hospitality students. So and these students are not trained to look at all the problems with aging. They're trained to create beautiful opportunities with age. And so we shared some of the things going on at the Prague Museum in Spain, for example, has an exhibit where you can touch and feel the Mona Lisa, and so that people with sight can do it, as well as people with visual and hearing can do it, so that you can experience the artwork and share about it. And there's so many more examples to share about all of these things, but there's, if you write to me, I will give you all the things that you can do to make a difference in your community on these issues. And we are always wanting our municipalities to join and make their communities better for people of all ages, lifelong communities, so that people thrive every day of their lives. And we're very interested. We want the entire state age-friendly. We want the entire world age-friendly.
Excellent. Before I ask the next question, could I put the screen back on you, Kathy, so that people can see you when you're answering questions? Is that okay with you? Okay. Excellent. So our next question is from Sunita. She says, in Chicago, my mom was given a list of phone numbers that she could call if she needed a ride anywhere. She has not seen any of these such lists in Sarasota, and she was wondering if you know if there's such a service they hear.
Yeah, well, I will tell you that we're very fortunate to have Independent Transportation Network. ITN was created by a woman in Maine in the 1990s. Her 5-year-old child was hit by an older driver. And rather than get angry, she created a volunteer driving program because she said, my goodness, what are we doing to people when they can no longer get to where they need to go? And so there is also another one in Orlando. So Florida's fortunate enough to have two, but ITN provides transportation at any time for any reason. And now the cost is akin to a taxi ride. However, they also have some subsidized rides. So that is a terrific service. It's very personable. People get to know you. They even do some karaoke along the ride sometimes to really make it fun. They created this Let's Go Places program that frankly was modeled after our MBA students who created the idea. And so there's options, and of course ride sharing with Uber and Lyft. Not everybody has a smartphone, but there are still ways to access that. We realize that, but transportation's under disruption, my friends. And there's also, if you remember, there was a time where there was a horse and buggy, then the car came along. Well, we are at that point. And I'll just give you an example. Pinellas County, I was at a transportation event, and it was either 6 or 8 million rides that their buses provided every year. And they said that if they gave a $5 Uber voucher to every one of those riders, it's still less cost than maintaining that fleet. So public transportation in all transportation is under great disruption right now, and people are really much more interested in walkability as well. It is definitely, talk about the magic pill. Walking is the magic pill for health.
Excellent. Our next question is from Sumi Lee. She says, thanks for your great talk. Can you share more about how we can cope with ageism or age discrimination still prevalent in our society, especially among younger people? And then she says, also, can USF move towards a more age-friendly university?
Yeah, so on the ageism, a big communications firm was just recently funded by all the big organizations in aging, Gerontological Organization, ARP, American Society on Aging. They wanted to know, why is it that the country shuts down when they hear the word aging? And it really is ageism underlies it. And part of it is the frame that people immediately assume is aging is associated with decline, negativity, death, and people just shut down. They just don't see any positivity with age. And so the first thing is we need to recognize ageism. We weren't born thinking that old was a bad word. That was socially constructed. And I got to tell you, we are in the midst of a change. We're all getting older. And this is the new older age, and there will be a point where people don't even realize, but we are still in the midst of, judging stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination, thoughts, feelings, and actions on behalf of another age group. We need to become aware of that. We need to challenge it. And some of the things that we can do are things like looking at our language. The more we otherize people, that is a dehumanizing angle. And so it's not us versus them. It's the distance is time, my friends. We are going to be older. People were young once too. So when we say things like we, us, our friends and family, so language matters, being aware of it matters. And I will tell you that intentional, reciprocal learning from each other matters. And I'm going to give you a quick story really quickly. In my Sociology of Aging course, we cover all aspects of aging, and the students are constantly doing reflection essays. And the one student wrote to me, and I get many reflections like this, and the student said, it was your class. He must have worked in some sort of business where this older guy would take the best shifts, the best day slots, and everybody else didn't like him because of that. And the student said to me, it was your class that I realized he had to work economically, it was good for him socially, and that he cannot drive at night, and it changed him. And what's happening from students who are learning these things is they're developing more empathy and understanding. And by the way, it goes both ways. Older people need to also understand what it's like to be young and what it's like to manage this incredibly busy lives today, and all raising the children again, and all these sorts of things. So it is intentional, deliberate. On the Age-Friendly University, we already doing so much at USF as a collective asset in aging. We can do more, and we can easily have that designation. And I would love to see us do that. And we're going to march forward with that. I mean, consolidation first, pandemic, but we're still not giving up on that.
Excellent. Ross Andell asks, what is the future of public or private funding for creating more age-friendly communities?
Well, I have to tell you, I'm one of the people, it is true that we see some of the best work in some of the funded programs, in part because they've got, job descriptions and people with really strong skill sets. But as I said, Maine has about half of those communities are volunteer run. I mean, it's run on a dime, people, and they're still doing things. They're still moving the needle. So, and I also want to point out that the entire country of Ireland is age friendly, and they're now going up on their 15th year. But I want to tell you something. They refuse to take one single penny to do this work. They said, how do we adopt every program, policy, and service to recognize the 100-year lifespan and revise everything of what we're doing to accommodate, and so that aging lives everywhere, so that it's not just a come in if you fund it, but that everybody gets it and sees it. And we, again, are beginning those inroads in many industry groups, the Planning Association, Parks and Rec, chambers, various state level and national level entities. We really are getting this leverage. It's taking a while because, you guys, there's so many problems in the world and so many issues. We have got to find how to align our work and show how it benefits multiple other sectors, win-win-wins, and and we're doing that. But that's how we're stronger together. But that's how we embed aging, an aging lens in everything, so that we can all have this great life and all benefit.
Great. And then our last question: how does age-friendly communities help those who have Alzheimer's disease?
Well, an age-friendly community, again, is helping everybody of all ages and abilities. It's really interesting you mentioned that, because there is a dementia community movement as well, and they are aligned. The dementia community is much more specific to people with cognitive impairment, and businesses and shop owners to recognize people with degrees of cognitive impairment. We have about 500,000 people with dementia in Florida, so we do have an awful lot of people, and we have even more people with stages of mild cognitive impairment and such. But by the way, we're also learning more about preventing dementia and cognitive engagement, cognitive stimulation, lifelong learning, good blood flow to the brain. The brain is an organ, a vascular organ. So there's a lot of things we can, and staying engaged, all of these things we can do to stave off cognitive impairment. So we need to do that at the same time. But we can do, dementia is one subset of aging. And even though increasing numbers experience dementia with age, the vast majority of people do not. But our work is inclusive of dementia as well. One quick thing you can do is look up Dementia Friend America, and by watching just 2 videos that will take 5 minutes of your time, you can be a dementia friend and make a difference.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kathy. I'll put it back over to me. All right, hello everybody. I just want to say thank you so much, Kathy, for joining us and for imparting all of this knowledge that I know personally I didn't know any of it, so always happy to learn something new. But I want to thank all of our attendees as well for setting some time aside and for spending it with us, even though we can't see you. And for just being here for Kathy and for our community. Kathy, do you have any final sentiments?
I just want to say, I don't know how many people are on or participating, but please email me, because glad to somehow engage you in this work. We're stronger together.
All right, well, on behalf of WLP, I just want to say thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening and be safe.